They all be doing Auburn. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the head coach, Hugh Freeze, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So head coach Hugh Freeze enters his second season as the head coach of Auburn. This is his fourth college head coaching job and his 11th season as a college head coach. He was the head coach at Arkansas State and Ole Miss and Liberty up before he became the head coach at Auburn. His overall record as a head coach is 89 and 49. And his first full recruiting class at Auburn was really good, ranking 10th in the country. And if I was to rank Hugh Freeze of all the coaches in college football, I'd rank him somewhere in the top 25. I think he's a pretty good coach. And so he was the head coach at Arkansas State in 2011 for one season and got them to a 10-2 record. And that got him the head coaching job at Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, the year before he got there, had their worst season ever, only winning 2 games. And then his first year there, he got them to a bowl win, winning 7 games. And then he continued to improve every year he was there until his last season. He got them 8 wins his second season, and then 9 wins the third season, and then 10 wins the fourth season, and then his last season he had his worst year there, only getting 5 wins, and then he was fired for other reasons than his record. And then at Liberty, he was 34 and 15 in 4 seasons there, having it 3 8-win seasons and one 10-win season. And starting on the roster at quarterback, uh, they're not in good shape here. I think this is what's going to stop Auburn from being a much improved team this year. Is the quarterback position? Peyton Thorne comes back, and he was probably the worst quarterback in the SEC last season, and one of the worst quarterbacks in the country last season. I don't think he knows what he's doing. And last season, he had in 13 games only 1,755 passing yards, and he only completed 61.1% of his passes and only threw 16 touchdown passes and only had a 6.6 yards per throw average. And he did, though, rush for 515 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think Hugh Freeze should have tried to get a quarterback in the portal because for Hugh Freeze to have success as a football coach, I think he has to have a good quarterback. I know some coaches can win a lot of games without a good quarterback, but I don't think Hugh Freeze is one of those coaches. And if you're getting ideas of typing in the comments that I just don't know what I'm talking about, and that Auburn can go 16-0 with Peyton Thorne playing quarterback. I'm an Ole Miss fan, so I actually know a little bit about Hugh Freeze, and the whole time he was at Ole Miss, he had a pretty good to really good quarterback. He only had 2 different quarterbacks. Bo Wallace for 3 seasons, and then Chad Kelly for 2 seasons. Wallace was a pretty good quarterback, and then Chad Kelly was one of the best quarterbacks in the country both years he was at Ole Miss. At wide receiver, though, I think they're going to be much improved here. And as bad as Peyton Thorne was last season, it wasn't all his fault to why Auburn was so bad at throwing the football last year. They ranked 121st in passing, only averaging 162.2 yards per game. There were wide receivers that were horrible last season, but Hugh Freeze has completely redone their starting group of receivers this year. He brought in 2 good receivers from the portal. He brought in Keandre Lambert Smith from Penn State, who was their best receiver last season, catching 53 passes for 673 and 4 touchdowns, averaging 12.7 a catch. And then he brought in a receiver from Georgia State, Robert Lewis, who had last season 70 catches for 877 and 7 touchdowns, averaging 12.5 a catch. And then they have Cam Coleman, who was the number 5 overall recruit of 2024 and a 5-star wide receiver who is expected to start for them as a true freshman this year. And he led all of their receivers in the spring game with 4 catches for 92 yards and a 34-yard touchdown catch. And I think he could be one of the best receivers in the SEC, even as a true freshman. And then at tight end, they've got one of the better tight ends in the SEC coming back, Rivaldo Fairweather, who had last season 38 catches for 394 and 6 touchdowns, averaging 10.4 a catch. And then at running back, this is the biggest strength, I think, of Auburn's team. So they were a good running team last season, averaging 189.3 rushing yards per game, ranking 23rd in the country. And they returned Jarquez Hunter, who is probably the SEC's best running back this season. He had last season 909 yards and 7 touchdowns on 159 carries, averaging 5.7 a carry, and had 3 games of over 100 rushing yards last season. He's going to play in the NFL, and he could have this year, but decided to come back to Auburn. And then they also have Damari Alston, who had only 64 carries last season, but had 320 yards and 2 touchdowns, and averaged 5 yards a carry. And he had against Alabama last season 85 yards on only 10 carries and a touchdown. Uh, I'm sure he'll get a lot more carries this season. And they also have Jeremiah Cobb, who was the 4-star running back, only got 33 carries last season, but had 172 and 2 touchdowns, averaging 5.2 a carry. I'm sure his carry number will go way up this year. Auburn, I think, will be one of the best rushing teams in the SEC this year. And their offense, I think, will improve this year with better receivers. And Hugh Freeze is taking over the play calling on offense. I think that will help them. And then on the offensive line, they look pretty good here. They've got 3 starters coming back and 4 players back that are very experienced, including a center Connor Liu, who is one of the best in the country, who had last year as a freshman playing 435 snaps and starting 5 games, only allowing 6 pressures and no sacks. And then they bring in a huge tackle from Mississippi State. His name is the Piercy Lewis, who is 6'7", 355, and is really good. He only allowed last season 2 sacks and 6 total pressures. And on the defensive side, I think they'll be pretty good here. Probably one of the better defenses of the SEC. Probably pretty similar to how they were last year. I like the coordinator hire. They brought in the coordinator from Texas A&M. His name is DJ Dirk, and he did a good job with their defense these past 2 seasons. And he was at Ole Miss before that, and really improved their defense. So on the defensive line, they have Keldrick Falk coming back, who is really good. He had last season 36 tackles and a sack and a pass breakup and 20 total pressures. And then they brought in a transfer from Arkansas State. His name is Ron Crawford, who had last season 44 tackles and 5.5 sacks and 37 total pressures and 2 forced fumbles and 2 fumble recoveries and a pass breakup. And they brought in several other transfers on the defensive line, but I think he's the best one of all of them. And then at linebacker, they look good here. They return Eugene Azente, who is one of the SEC's best linebackers. He was their leading tackler last season with 86 tackles and had 5 sacks and 22 total pressures and a fumble recovery and a pass breakup. And then they also have Jalen McLeod coming back, who is a great player. He had in 12 games at 50 tackles and 5.5 sacks and 37 total pressures and a pass breakup and a forced fumble and fumble recovery. And then they bring in a transfer linebacker from Duke, Dorian Mosey, who had last season in 10 games 61 tackles and two pass breakups and an interception and two total pressures. And then in the secondary, they've got two really good players here. They bring in a really good safety from Texas, Jaron Thompson. He had last season in 12 games 38 tackles and uh, three interceptions and one for a touchdown and seven pass breakups. And he had a big interception on Jalen Milroe against Alabama last season that led to a touchdown. And they have a really good cornerback coming back, Keontae Scott, who has in 22 games combined 98 tackles and eight pass breakups. And then special teams for Auburn may be the best in the country. They have the best kicker in the country coming back, Alex McPherson, who made 13 of 13 field goals and 40 of 40 extra points last season. Then they have a really good punter coming back, Oscar Chapman, who averaged 44.8 yards per punt last season and had 16 punts of over 50 yards. And then they have their cornerback, Keontae Scott, back returning punts for them, who was the SEC's best punt returner last season, averaging 14.8 yards per punt return and had a punt return for a touchdown last season. So now moving on to the predictions, they start the year against Alabama A&M, which will be an easy win, and then they play California at home. So California is a terrible team. I've said that many times. But Auburn is not going to be so good this year to where they can just blow out a team like Cal. I don't think. I think it'll be somewhat competitive, but I do think Auburn will end up winning this one by a couple of touchdowns. So then they play New Mexico. Should be an easy win. So then they play their first conference opponent at home, Arkansas, a team that I think is really going to struggle this year, but could make this game competitive. They do play tough a lot of times, even against teams that are much better than them. And Auburn is clearly better than Arkansas, in my opinion, but not so much better to where they wouldn't be able to lose this game. Uh, so Arkansas may be able to score into the 20s in this game with a probably improved offense this year with Petrino calling the plays. But they don't have enough on their offense to score a lot in this game, I don't think. And Arkansas's defense, I think, is going to struggle overall this year. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Auburn's run game, and that's what Auburn is still going to want to do most of the time this year. So I think Auburn wins by at least a touchdown. So then they play Oklahoma at home. So I think this will be a pretty close one. I could see it going either way. I think it'll be a low-scoring game. Oklahoma's defense, I think, is going to make it hard on Auburn to score in this game. I don't think Auburn will score much. Oklahoma's front seven is so good. I think Auburn won't be able to run it near as well as they usually will this year on Oklahoma. And Auburn having a bad quarterback is bad. If their run game gets shut down. And Oklahoma's secondary is also really good. Uh, and Oklahoma, I think, will be slowed down offensively in this game by Auburn's pretty good defense. Oklahoma is really good at the wide receiver and running back positions, but their offensive line isn't very good, and their quarterback is very inexperienced. But Oklahoma, I think, is the better team and will win this one by around a touchdown. So then they play on the road at Georgia. This one I don't think will be close at all. I think Georgia will blow Auburn out. So I know it was close last year, but when this game has been at Athens, Georgia, it's not usually been close. It's usually been a big win for Georgia, and I think that'll be the case this year. I think Georgia's defense will shut down Auburn's offense, and Auburn's defense will probably be good enough to stop Georgia from getting in the 40s in this game, but I think they'll still score quite a bit, and it'll be like a 34 to 10 type of game. And then on the road at Missouri, getting a week off in between Georgia and Missouri. This is one that I could see Auburn winning. I think it'll be close. So Missouri's offense, I think it will get slowed down a little bit by Auburn's defense, but Auburn's defense, I don't think is going to slow them down that much because Auburn just doesn't play near as well when they're on the road. I think Missouri will still score quite a few points in this game. And I don't really think Missouri's defense is that good. But Auburn, I think, will score a decent amount of points in this game, but I don't really think they'll quite be able to keep up with Missouri, and I think Missouri will win. So then on the road at Kentucky, a third straight road game is really tough. So these two teams are pretty even, in my opinion. Auburn, I think, is a much better rushing team, and the line of scrimmage is pretty similar. And Kentucky's new quarterback, I think, has a much higher ceiling than Peyton Thorne does, but he's unproven in college. Now, Kentucky does have some really good receivers on their team too. And Kentucky's defense, like Auburn's, is very solid everywhere. So I'm just going to go with the home team and say that Kentucky wins a really close one. So then they play Vanderbilt. They get to recover from losing four in a row. I think they'll blow out Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt will have no hope of slowing down their run game, and I think that those receivers at Auburn will give Vanderbilt a really tough time, and Auburn's defense will shut down Vanderbilt's almost non-existent offense. And then Louisiana Monroe, this should be an easy win. And then they play Texas A&M at home. So I do think Auburn is going to get one big win this year. And uh, if you watch my A&M video, you know I'm high on them and actually have them undefeated at this point of the season. So with this game being at Auburn, I think Auburn's defense will play really well and slow down A&M's offense, which I think is going to be good this year into the 20s. And Auburn won't score a whole lot in this game. A&M has a good defense, but I think they'll be able to get into the 20s too. And I think it'll be a really close game, but Auburn is such a tough place to play. And I think A&M's a better team, but I think the home field advantage does it, and Auburn gets a big win. So then the year the Iron Bowl at Tuscaloosa. So when this one's been at Tuscaloosa, Alabama's usually won pretty easily. Now I'm not so sure that that's going to happen this year without Nick Saban. I think this will probably be a more competitive game than it has been in the past when it's been at Tuscaloosa. Alabama's probably going to be down, and Auburn's probably going to be a little improved. But I don't think this will quite go down to the end. I think Jalen Milroe will make some big plays and get Alabama the win by around 10 points. So my final prediction for Auburn is 7-5 overall and 3-5 in the conference. They look to me like a team that's going to be a little bit improved from last season, but uh, probably 2025 will be the year that they can be a real contender in the SEC when they can maybe finally get a good quarterback. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.